Hi everyone, my name is Kartik and my channel is about mental models. Welcome to my second video of the Systems Thinking mini-series, and in this video I will be talking about the pathways mental model. This model can have other names as well, but I will use the term pathways. Now, there are two types of pathways. Simple pathways or interconnected ones. Now, if I were to draw examples of these two out, they would look something like this. So for the simple one, you would have something like that. And so it sort of follows the arrows around. And for the interconnected ones, you will have something a bit more like, say, this. That goes there, that goes there, that comes down, and that goes that way as well. Something like this. So as you can see, it's all interconnected. There are arrows going back and forth, whereas the simple one, in the simple pathway, the arrows are going in one direction. The simple pathway is like following a recipe or a how-to guide, and it's essentially that one step follows another. Another way to think about this is in terms of cause and effect going in one direction, such as 1 causes 2, 2 causes 3, which causes 4, 4 which causes 5, and 5 causes 6, as an example. And the thought process is that we see reality as a series of events, one after another. So that's the thought process. Now let me take an example of, say, grass. Let me take a mundane example on grass. So we have, say, grass levels falling. That's number 1. So we do grass seeding, 2. That moves on to 3, which is new grass growth. After that, grass levels rise, 4. Because of that, there is more grazing, so more animals graze on the grass. That's 5. Because of more grazing, grass levels are now again falling, and so That was 6. And so last, number 7, we do grass seeding again. And so even though number 2 and number 7 here, the do grass seeding, even though number 2 and number 7 are repeating, the mental process, as I said, this is the mental process. The mental process is to see it as a series of events, one after another. Therefore, number 2 and number 7, these two are seen to be different and unrelated. And so they're not the same thing, and that because we're following that mental process of seeing it as a series of events, one after another. Now, if I take the systems thinking approach, I'm substituting the series of events, one after another thought process with another mental process, with another thought process of how do the consequences of actions feedback to affect the system. So it's a little bit long-winded, but this is now the thought process. How do the consequences of actions feed back to affect the system? And so that's why we have these feedback arrows going back into the system, going back into earlier parts of the system. And this is the new thought process with these interconnected pathways, if that wasn't already clear. So if I take this grass example again, the same example, and I sort of draw it from a simple pathway into an interconnected one, it would look something like this. So it's the same example of grass, and that would be grass levels are sort of, as I said, falling, and so there is grass seeding, there's new grass growth. So that comes back to this to say grass levels rise. And because of that, we have another loop of grazing. So again, animals graze on the grass, and that leads to, again, grass levels falling. And so we have this interconnected pathway, and we can see there are loops. There are 2 loops here that are working. So this representation shows the interconnectedness. Now, you're probably thinking, so what's the big deal here? This is the same as this. So why do I need to go into an interconnected system thinking way when I can have a simpler way? What's the big deal? What's the big deal here? The key insight is that in the simple pathway, you will most likely see and read the pathway in pairs, i.e. 1 causes 2 or 4 causes 5. So these two together, these two together. You will take them in pairs, but in the interconnected pathway, you will see and read the relationships between all of the events, not just in pairs. So you'll see everything together and how they connect. And you might still be thinking, well, again, what is the big deal in this? Well, there are 2 things. How we describe our actions affects the kind of actions we take. how we describe our actions affects the kind of actions we take. So that's quite important. And number two, the simple pathway gives us the insight of what happens when. But the interconnected pathway gives us the deeper understanding of how things happened and why. And so, armed with this knowledge of describing events, understanding how and why, as well as seeing all the relationships, will help us to better understand a system. So the goal is to better understand a system. And as I said in the first video of this mini-series, if we understand the system, we can solve the problem, because problems exist within systems. Finally, I want to introduce a fancy term called, just going to write it here, so I'm running out of room, Antifragility. Antifragility, or antifragile, means something is meta-resilient. So antifragility means something is meta-resilient. So you've heard me say the words metacognition, meta-probability, and now a new meta-resilient. All this means, and what antifragility means, all this means is that systems can learn from negative events and shocks, and as a result be able to, over time, withstand these shocks, and so the system will get stronger the more it encounters these shocks. Of course, the shocks need to be small enough such that the system can handle them, and then the shocks can grow. If you give a system a shock that is too big for it to handle, then it will destroy the system in the first place. Think of it as falling ill and building up your immune system. If you get something that is too big for the immune system to handle, then it could be fatal. So it's that kind of an analogy. The idea is for the system to get stronger by handling smaller shocks and learning from those. And this is achieved through the feedback loops. So here, or here, or here. So I've put double arrows to show sort of where we've got the feedbacks happening. And so, as I said, this is achieved through feedback loops, as it allows the return of information into the system for it to be able, for the system to be able to correct, take action and learn. By having a good structure of feedback, the system is more anti-fragile, more meta-resilient than a system that is simple and or not built to handle negative events. And so that's what antifragility is about and what meta-resilient is about. And you can see that in interconnected systems or interconnected pathways rather than in simple pathways. And so that's another benefit of systems rather than sort of something in this fashion. And I will cover feedback loops in more detail in one of my later videos as part of this systems thinking mini series. Well, that's all for this video on pathways. If you like this video, please like, share and subscribe to my channel. And if you missed my first video on systems thinking, or you want to recap or revisit, then you can watch it here. Thank you again for watching, and I will see you in the next one with another video. Bye bye.